something I would like to do, is it? And the business development is something for the wider business.
Yeah, that's right. So we'll get on to it when we get into it. So people development, as in putting the person at the centre, i.e. yourself. And we'll get on to what that means in terms of, I refer to that as being bottom up or inside out, whichever term you want to use. So it's definitely got the person at the centre. So it's something that you would drive towards or something you would work with. And then to flip that over, the biz dev coming at it from, there are things that make sense from a more successful business perspective. So top down or outside in kind of thing. So yeah, just a little thing. We'll just have a little play around with it whilst I'm working through the related experience and see if we can join it together. We're always pushed for a little bit of time on this, and I'm sure Tony and Gary will join us. So we'll get started. And thanks, if they do, we'll just kind of introduce them when they come. Great to meet you all, and thanks for taking up some of your time on a Friday afternoon. This is a big picture webinar. Every 2 weeks we run a webinar to delve into a theme that has engagement at the centre of what we do, and that's what we specialise in. We're a specialist organisation in people development and business development, so this is a theme that's quite close to our heart. Now, just to get you started with Zoom, we play a little game at the beginning. Richard and Lynn, you haven't been in this. It's just to get us comfortable with the tech. If you've got a little pen, I know you have because I can see yours, Lynn, just write down on your page, zip, zap, zop. Richard, if you would do the same, you did hear that right. There's nothing strange or awkward about this. Zip, zap, zop. And what we do is I zip Chris, and when I do zip Chris, and I haven't just yet, Chris, because she's very compliant and loves this game and is so good at it, she will zap somebody else. She could come back to me, I'll go somewhere else. So I'm going to zip Chris.
Okay, and I'm going to tell you what my issue is. I would like to do more business with housing associations because I love the work that they do in communities and just making a huge difference. And I'm going to zap Richard.
The one that I used wasn't actually a personal one to me. It was one I'd come across with someone else, and it was because it's quite recent, and it was someone wanting to carry out wider aspects of the role, be more influential as opposed to being siloed into the same kind of day-to-day tasks, really. And I will zop Lynn.
Hi, you can hear me okay, can you?
We can, yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to work with more clients like a particular person that I work with, Emma, because I've just got a really easy, authentic relationship with her. She's the CEO of an organisation I work with, and business development. I'd love more clients like a company called Wessex that I work with as well.
Okay.
And do I need to zip somebody now?
Yeah, zip someone.
Or shall I zip? I can zip back to you, Martin. That makes sense, doesn't it?
No one ever does that. And some weeks when there are more people on, I have to actually go out and pull it back to me. But we've been compliant in one respect, that we've gone around the cameras because there are 4 of us, and that's what tends to happen. And incredibly non-compliant in that Chris remembered what we did last week, which was to announce our People Development Challenge as part of our Zip and Zap and Zop, which I love, but I'd forgotten we did that last week. So I was going to go for a really fast Zip, Zap, Zop, and then we did it, and then everyone followed you, Chris, which I just love. I just go with it, so it's all fine. And no, it's all good. We know a bit more about what your People Development Challenge is. Tony's just said she's coming off a different call, so she might make it and she might not. And Gary's on a train, so we'll plough on. In terms of related experience and what's at the centre of our approach is realising and recognising sometimes that awkward tension between the development of the people in an organisation and the development of the business itself, because I think there are 2 very different aspects and drivers and behaviours for that. And rather than put it to the back and not worry about it, actually it's very much the big picture way to bring that to the fore and to bring it out. And I think it's a difficult thing to do because they derive from different things. Now, the way our method and the big picture approach is working, we thread those two poles of the magnet, if you like, to through our workshops and our programs. So we recognize entirely there are different drivers for people development and different drivers for business development. And the best way I've heard it described from a colleague of mine, Julia Felton, is that the people development is the heart. It's the heart pumping the blood. It has to work in a business. The people have to be engaged and working, and that's very much the heart, and that's the essential organ, if you like. However, at the same time, you have the head, and the head is the business development element to it. And the head needs the heart needs the head for everything to work. And I like that kind of metaphor. And I do think it's difficult for organizations to balance those two things. And if at any point you have a thought and a view, you can either kind of visually put a hand up or something, or just park something in the chat room, and I will pause and kind of you can chip in and have a view, or just interrupt me. I'm absolutely fine with that. What I'm going to go on to is another piece of related experience is the fact that there are certain things which allow us to bind together people development and business development in a more effective way. And I'm going to give you two ideas here, which we'll then work through in the practical using our examples. One is that the purpose of a business, the why, the whole reason for its being is really important to get right, because that applies equally to the success of the individual and also to the business. So in the work that I've done to connect people development to the business, I've always been mindful that going to the purpose and understanding right back to basics what the business is there for, that's a really important thing to do. And often we use that alignment of purpose to look at alignment of customer and also the value that's created in the center of the big picture board. And that triangulation is really important as a fundamental building block to connecting people development to business development. And sometimes that can't be done in 5 or 10 minutes. It does require some time out. So sometimes you have to explain the rationale for that. Once that is in place, moving on to the measures. And when we get into the big picture practical, you've got the prop in front of you. You'll notice that on there, I provide you with a cut down version of the big picture board because of the time we've got. It's a much simplified version of Big Pic. But on it, it's not coincidence. I've provided to you half the symbols that we use in practice. You'll see one of them behind me, this way, the team symbol. That's the red symbol that you've got on there. And whilst I'm talking, if you haven't already, just kind of remove or detach those from the prop, either just tear them off or cut them out if you would, because we're going to use them in a moment. Down from there, I believe you've got the, if I remember rightly, the measure symbol, which is important. And in a moment, I'm going to share a board with you so you can see how I kind of start connecting these things together. And I would encourage you to do the same. And the reason I mention the measure symbol is because if you've got the alignment of the purpose of the business at the top, and you've also got the customer aligned and also the products and services or the value aligned, then to me, it's the measures. The measure is a common currency that allows you to connect the development of the person. The measure makes sense to the person because it's bottom up. Just earlier, Lynn, when we were talking, your question was a good one, which is the difference between the two, and all, even just having that conversation is important. And I explained about the different points of perspective. And with those 2 points of perspective, thinking about the measure from each perspective is actually quite a simple thing to bring it back together. So what we'll go through in this little practical is, what is the measure that makes sense to you in the sense of a piece of people development from a bottom-up, inside-out perspective? And then we'll pause and, if you like, run round the edge and back in the other direction and think, what is the measure that we can define that makes sense in terms of the overall success of the business and its development? And what I like about that approach is that we're just talking about measures. What we're recognizing is there are different types of measure that make more sense to the individual, and there are other measures that make more sense to the business. and we'll get into a little practical in a moment. I'm just going to pause there for any thoughts or reflections. With it being a nice small group, we've got a bit of time to knock some ideas about, and I don't like talking for half an hour without a breath. So I don't know if you want to share any thoughts.
I think what you said, that makes sense. This coming on this webinar has come about because I put on LinkedIn I needed some help, and I did the workshop I needed help with on Wednesday. And what I do a lot of is work with dental corporates who are growing, and they're acquiring dental practices to grow, and they think of it very much in process terms, which I think is the business development you're talking about, and they forget about engagement with the client, the person who's selling their dental practice. And that engagement is about people to people, about relationship. I'm sort of trying to relate what you're saying to, you know, what I've done and make sense of it. And what I started with is what we always have to start with. There's loads of dental corporates out there when you move in this world, and they're all doing the same thing. So started with, what is it that you're doing? What is it that you're offering that's different? And I think that was the why, the purpose. And then the engagement is about how do you convey that why? And then the business part is how does that lead to results and outcomes?
Absolutely.
So, with what you're talking about in relation to what I've just done.
No, it absolutely is. And in respect of the fact we haven't done any prep or background for this, you've almost in your own way described all of those same things in maybe slightly different order, but not really. They actually stand up. It's probably just the clarity and the definition of knowing which one you're talking about at each point comes out, but they're all in like the bag, so to speak. It's just which order you pick them out. And maybe that should be a theme of the practical that we do now, is that it's about the sequence that you kind of apply them, just gives you a little bit of structure and a frame to it.
That's what I often find, I sort of intuitively do things, and then find, somebody else has got that formula, but I've sort of intuitively done it. But it's a bit messy in getting there sometimes, because you're using your intuition as you go, as you work through it together.
No,
so
really
you're talking about giving it a bit of a structure.
Yeah, no, I like that a lot. In terms of, you use the word formula, and I think with big picture, with it being a series of symbols which represent key elements of the business, of which are 6, that's a part of the formula.
Okay.
So the idea being that I've done the hard work to give you the symbols in whatever size, from frisbee size to poker chip to little symbol size. The symbols don't change. That's part of the formula. Another part of the formula is the board. So on the prop in front of you, you'll see you've got operations in the center, marketing to the left, and customer care. That is like a simplified version of another element to the formula. So I'd love to explore. So let's get into the practical. So on your prop, if you would, in the top left, if you just put the where there's a place for a name for the business that you are thinking about, whether it's your own or a client, just in that top left, put in the name of that business if you would. You can put the date as well if you like. And at any point, if you get stuck, just shout up and I'll help along. It's about you interacting and having a go yourself. We call it making and doing. And then if we're going to carry this example through, if you were to go at the top of the page, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to share and follow along on my board. It happens to be an electronic board, but it's you should be able to see similarities between. So what I've got here is I've got some symbols on it. You'll see if I zoom out, it looks a bit like this, but you can see I've laid it out in the same pattern as you've got. So I've just zoomed out for now, so you don't need to see the writing. I've got marketing to the left, operations in the middle, and customer care. And at the top of the page, if you notice there, I've just put the purpose of my example, which is I'm going for to provider of locally sourced produce. So it's a kind of food type of business. So in the green box at the top, It just so happens to be the example I'm using. It could be anything. It works for any type of business. The patterns I'm going through is just I like to use an example. So if we were on a mission, or we were encouraging ourselves or our client to connect their people development to their business development, this is the first step of the practical. As Lynn's explained, it's a really good idea to have a conversation about what the business is here to do in terms of the purpose. And the way we deploy that in the room is that we give people resources, just like I've given you a resource now. It's not about me telling you, and it makes it a bit awkward because I can't kind of lean over your shoulder and see what you're writing. However, if I give you the right kind of prompts in a reasonable framework, and in no way am I overwhelming or in any way a threat to you, then even the most disillusioned or disenfranchised of employees, in my experience, are willing to play along, if you like, and actually get involved. And I'm giving you something to do. So it's not my truth, it's your truth. So is everybody would anyone share a purpose for the business that they're talking about, whether it be their own or a client's?
I don't mind sharing my purpose, and basically we help people to perform better through learning better, so through accelerated learning and using data.
Lovely. And that's one that you've arrived at over a few years, I guess, Chris. So you've been probably up and down and around the houses a bit, but that's where you become comfortable with where you end up.
I think it's the most succinct way of describing it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Richard, maybe from a different background, we'll chat about this on Tuesday as a business analyst, which is a role I know quite well. I'm not sure which business you might be choosing to use as an example, if that's easy for you.
Yeah, I suppose that's what I was just thinking. Is there's a few examples I could draw on. I mean, the most recent one would be providing bespoke software for consumer lending. Store cards and things like that.
Nice.
Store cards and loans.
Yeah. So we've all got here different examples, and yet the patterns that we talk about should work. So back to the plot of people development. If I just move down the page to the center, now you'll notice here I have positioned myself here. This is me, and this is the team symbol. So you should have a team symbol, the red symbol, which you may have torn off, and just position it on the board where you think it's most relevant. And this is the person that we're talking about in terms of their development. So I've not really thought this through from every angle, but for me, this is going to be me playing this role because it's easier for me to imagine if I imagine it's me. And in my example of working for a business that sources locally, local produce to supermarkets in effect, this is me, and my role is within operations. So if I just scroll up a little bit, you'll see I've put my team symbol there in the operation space, but it doesn't have to necessarily be so. It could be in the marketing and sales or the customer care. So just position the team symbol where you think it is. And what we're going to do is now talk about the development of this individual, which in this case is me. And I'm just going to use the measure symbol for this. So what I would encourage with big picture conversation around, obviously it's visual and we're making connections and joining the dots, and that's very much at the center of big picture. I've come up with I've had a conversation, or I've been helped through a conversation where I've realized from a people development perspective, I want to work more closely with the customer. Now, this is quite an interesting one for big picture, because if the video tech's working, if I see myself down here and I want to work more closely with the customer, probably what will happen is I want to move myself closer to this yellow customer journey line, and that measure goes with me because it's a bit like a combo. It's moving up. I'm wanting to get closer to the customer, and that means getting, in big picture terms, that means getting closer to that yellow customer journey line. Now, what I want to bring on is two other measures, which are personal development measures, because I'm not assuming that that's all I want to do. There might be other things as well, but for now, I'm just going to park people development 2 and 3 here. And in terms of look at the time a little bit. Let's take one example. I can't remember what was posted in the chat. Would anyone share their people development measure or goal or aspiration with me?
So mine was around carrying out wider aspects of the role as opposed to being siloed into the same tasks.
Brilliant. I love that. I'm glad you reminded me of that one, Richard, because by definition, big picture helps. You can see how it broadens out. And I'm just going to get my power. Just talk amongst yourself. Lynn and Chris, would you just share yours just for a moment?
I'm ready. Is that all right, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
I've changed mine actually from what I said at the beginning, because I think it's going to work for me if I apply it to what I was just talking about, dentistry. So I think the people development bit is the team that deal with the buy-in of the dental practice. It's like quite processy job that they do. They get all the info from the solicitors and the accountants and stuff to make sure the business is valued properly. So it's a lot of technical, tasky stuff. I think they need to understand the customer's perspective more than they do. They get really sucked into task and forget that there's a customer at the end of it who's having to provide all the paperwork and still do their day job, which is being a dentist.
Yeah.
I hope that works.
No, it does. And I'm always unpicking language and words. I'm not got an English background or psychology or anything, but Richard's talked about the silo element. And obviously with big picture,
similar.
It's about broadening horizons. And I think you picked up, Lynn, or you mentioned being sucked into. And I think someone watching this recording would think, oh, well, how fortunate it is that people are using examples that are relevant. But this happens all the time. If we use a reasonable framework and we have captured that in the patterns, then it's no coincidence that again and again, the things that we stumble across and find difficult in business, I believe, can be actually helped and broken down by using the right framework. So that pattern that Richard said about silos and that pattern you said, Lynn, about being sucked into, it's all, if we apply a broadening horizons pattern to that, then actually that is going to go somewhat to help the individual who's sat there getting very blindfolded or blinkered towards the problem, and actually the problem might be better defined by broadening one's horizons. And it's no coincidence that I could zoom in and out of this just to demonstrate that that's the big picture in terms of the business. You can't read the text, but visually it's a way of looking across the whole business, and we know the purposes at the top. We know where the team symbol is and the measures. Now, in this example, to kind of canter through it and to test that, my challenge here that I brought on is, hang on a sec, if this is about people development and I want to work more closely with the customer, am I in the wrong place? The question is, as a challenge, is if I'm in operations, yes, we deliver value to operations, but our relationship with our customer in operations is one of delivery. We provide local produce, and please do apply that pattern to whatever business you're thinking, whether it's dentistry or credit card or learning. Is that in my example here, am I in the right? The challenge for me is if I want to work more closely with the customer, but I'm in operations and I am in a silo and I am being sucked into that, and I'm using my language carefully now to reuse some of the terms that we've used. Am I in the wrong place? And what big picture does, if I just bring this on, is these are all the different symbols we use. And whilst we're using the simplified form, I just wanted to broaden horizons in two respects. Firstly, there are other areas of the business, which if you believe in systems thinking, everything is connected together. So operations, marketing, sales, partners and suppliers at the top, management and administration at the bottom, which is how the whole big picture board is laid out. The symbols actually encourage us to broaden our horizons as well. We've talked a little bit about the team. We've mentioned the customer. It feels really natural running left to right. We may bring in technology. We haven't talked about this on this call because we won't have time, but technology plays a role as well. Maybe in dentistry, it has a very specific role in terms of managing the customer, but also the specialist tech that you use in the dentist. Measures we've talked about. Money and processes we won't have time to do, but just start to think about the effect of money and processes. You mentioned, I think, Lynn, around processes earlier, which was an interesting one. So we would have a conversation about that. The idea being is we'll leave challenges and opportunities because we're going to use them. The idea being there, by giving people these dots and the meaning for them, anybody, irrespective of background, education, knowledge and experience and seniority, is quite able to make connections and offer ideas, and that's really powerful. And in this scenario, it's about people development and business development, but it's a basic primal instinct to be able to connect the dots if those dots are reasonable, and that's how big picture works. So I'm just going to run this through. If I'm in the wrong place, what we would do is, if I just move along the board a little bit, I would have a little conversation. If I went into facilitation mode, is what we do is we take the negative energy of the challenge, which is I'm in the wrong place, and then you flip that. It's quite an easy thing to do. It's a bit like a judo roll. So if you have lots of negative energy, Black Hat, Edward de Bono, etc., what you can then do is flip that into an opportunity. So the types of opportunities which might come out, probably, I'll leave that one out. Let's just do these two. So learn about the key messages. So I think what we would be talking about here is the key messages. If I'm going to spend more time and work more closely with the customer, I need to learn about the key messages and what that company means, and that's linked to purpose, and we're getting a bit closer to business development. So by facilitating a conversation through challenges and opportunities, we are by definition broadening our horizons to the business development piece. Key messages are a business development piece and essential to understand it. And without lecturing and telling the individual what they should and could be doing, by facilitating the conversation in this way, they realize it for themselves. And we might say, actually, could you spend some time with the marketing team? I.e., if you want to spend more time with the customer, a natural progression of that conversation could be, what I'll do, I'll take the opportunity to go and spend more time with the marketing team. Now, to finish off the kind of example to its logical conclusion, to link it fully to business development, if I know that the business want to find more customers like Asda, then if I were to, I know you've only got one measure symbol, but if you were to think of an example of a measure that represents the business development need that you have identified earlier, if you position that on the board, as well as your personal development one, and almost draw, I'm not going to do it on here, but draw a line between, what you're recognizing is there are two different but equally important needs at play here. There's the need of the person through their people development, and there's the need of the business. And by putting them on the same board, it's a bit like a dot-to-dot puzzle. You start to think and encourage the relationship between the two. I don't know if anyone can give me an example of a business development one. We may have mentioned it earlier, but Chris, what was yours? You think you mentioned one earlier?
Yeah, I would like to do more work with different housing associations. I've done some work with housing associations, and one of my clients is Stockport Homes, and I just love the work they do. They do fantastic work in communities, but it's also a people development thing for me as well, in that I need to find who I get the message to, because Stockport Homes, I've had a relationship with them for over 5 years. It's other housing associations. Who do I get the in with? Is it going to be, it's learning more about their organisation and what their biggest challenges are. And as you've been talking, I've sort of been putting stickers on my big picture chart, and like who I need, what do I need to look at in terms of what they're saying about what they do. It's sort of like marketing and what their biggest challenges are. And So I understand the business that they do, but I need to understand their specific business, not just generally what housing associations do. So that's the people development bit for me.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of playing around with that on the big picture thing.
What I like about that, Chris, is that without realising it, and I think good people do this all the time, they take responsibility for them, for you or I having to do something. So what you said is you recognise where you want to get to and what the business development goal is, and then you take responsibility as a person for putting things in place. And I think that knowing which bits to do as a person to develop yourself to make sure you achieve those business goals is quite a strong technique. I just don't know if it's very easy to do in volume in teams, and therefore the approach, the processes we referred to earlier, the tool that you use has got to be smart and cute and right, because if it isn't, you will get stuck and lost and it will take too long. And if it takes too long, it burns up too many resources. So this is almost like a false example of us just individually looking at it. When you scale it up to teams, the approach has got to be that slick that there's no hopping off points, and you've got to make the framework really straight.
But I think that's where the big picture comes in, is that you can do it for teams, in that you can use this as a conversation, because I can have my own perspective and say, this is where I think the problem is, and I start talking to people about it, and I talk to a specific team, but then they can say, actually, no, that's not what the problem is. And so I think the tool is exactly right, because then it will lead you to what the real problem is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it really does. I like saying that, but sometimes I get that excited about the tool. I prefer to let others fill that space, and that's nicely put. You know, you're a little bit more familiar with it than Richard and Lynn, so I'm interested, just in closing. I like to finish quite promptly in half an hour. I'll go to Richard first. How did your example play out, Richard, with you seem to have been following along and scribbling something. I don't know if you can hold it up, or all the bits will fall off.
Well, yeah, I've not. What I've found is I've half used your tool and half written down on another piece of paper.
Absolutely, so, right, yeah.
So there's not a great picture to present. I've kind of looked at opportunities, measures, and the challenges faced. So, and I actually, to be honest, I've kind of skipped between people development and also business development. So, the people development, so in terms of the scenario of the software house providing customizable software, there was a challenge, which was to provide an out-of-the-box kind of MVP solution that has obvious strategic benefits, because it means for future clients there's something there that they can get quicker to live quickly. But in developing that MVP solution, there's certain challenges in that. There's a lot of analysis needs to be done to understand what that is, and that involves looking at all your previous clients and understanding what are the commonalities from your previous clients that you can put into this minimal viable product and use as a basis going forward. So that's a challenge, because you don't know that. But the opportunity is that, and this goes a bit into the people development thing, is that it gives the opportunity for certain people within that environment to go through that analysis, get close to the product, get close to the market, and the measure would probably become, once you have a live example to measure against. Your next client comes in, you know how quickly and how easily is it to live with your new MVP product versus how it was previously.
Nice. I like that. There's got an agile element to that, and the kind of evidence-based approach. And what I like is you almost approached it from the other way to test it out, which is the business first and then the people. And I think that can work as long as the person at the centre doesn't feel like they're being kind of boxed in. I would almost go people out, up and out, as opposed to companies coming down. And just in case, I mean, it can be done in the right way. It's just in case it leaves the individual feeling things are done to them, as opposed to them having the idea, which I always found like emergent behaviour quite powerful. But yeah, it's a nice example. I like it. Lynn, from your perspective, how do you find it?
I'm sort of getting my head around how you would use the tool. So I think I can see what the purpose of the tool is. It's getting people within the wider business to think in terms of systems. I think I do think in terms of systems. So I'm kind of I already think like that. So I'm kind of thinking, oh, what's the purpose of the big picture tool? And I'm having to stand back and go, it's because not everybody else thinks in systems and you're using the tool to help other people think in systems. And I'm again relating back to what I've just done recently. And the example I gave of the person who does the due diligence or the tasky bit, and the business need is to get that done as quickly as possible without pissing off the client, because it's like selling your house. It's a horrible experience for the client.
Yeah.
And actually what we did look at it as a system. We looked at it as a whole picture, and then the pieces within that, who was delivering what, and we looked at what can be done differently. They came up with their own solution, and the measure of that is that clients have a fantastic experience and the due diligence happens speedily. So I'm sort of relating it back to, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because I think that's what I do and that's what I've done. It's using your tool to give my clients, who I'm facilitating with, that whole picture, isn't it? So, yeah.
And it's a great leveler. And I mentioned earlier about it being accessible and reasonable to people. So the most disillusioned or disenfranchised individual who's a key stakeholder, but somebody who may not have engaged so far, by breaking the business down into a number of instantly recognizable symbols, which are your dots, and providing a place for them to put there, they can almost not avoid, it's unavoidable to get drawn into that chat. And once they become part of that conversation, what they do is, because they can see themselves getting their message across more clearly, they got drawn in, and that gives you the power and the energy to practice change and actually facilitate change in the organization, which is all about the outcomes and the behaviors. And once people are physically involved, we're doing this by tech, but in the room, there'll be lots of things laid around and they'll get involved through that way. That's a really good point of perspective. I need to bring it to a close there. So as usual, I've loved the time we've spent knocking a few ideas about. A smaller group actually suits me, because as you're talking, I'm getting ideas and writing things down, and that makes it much more interesting for me and hopefully for people watching. If you are watching, then Big Picture, as has been explained, is a way to bring people together in a really engaging conversation around the business with a real serious side to it as well. We provide our offering through the kits that we sell, which you can see at yourbigpic.com. If you look down, there's a range of different sizes and shapes to fit the environment, but they all use the same symbols and they all use the same board layout. That's our IP, that's at the center. We run workshops, both open events every 2 months, the Art of People Development, which is around induction, training and performance. The 2 months after that, we run the Art of Business Development, which is about providing a current focus for your business and also looking at future plans. And on top of that, when a business likes all of the workshops and all of the kits, what they do is they buy the programs. So we then, through the practitioners that I have, run programs around the people development and the business development. And that's what we provide: kits, workshops and programs. And I would urge you to, if you're watching this or you're with me now, just take a look through the site and have a look at the different materials. Our webinars are every 2 weeks, so you can go and sign up there. We run a bit of a natural rhythm, a circadian rhythm, as I call it, of Big Picture, which is cycle, build, measure, learn. There's one for Richard. Lean startup and all of that. So, do something, learn from it, get feedback, help people, learn, move on, do it again. So I wish you all a lovely weekend. I hope you think that was good use of your time. I'll ask you a bit of feedback. It's been lovely to spend some time in your company. Hope you got something nice lined up and the weekend. And then Richard, I'm seeing you next week, and I'll catch up with Chris and Lynn at the next opportunity. So take care, look after yourselves.
All right. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.